June 10, 1944. 4 days after D-Day. A column of American M4 Sherman tanks is moving through the bocage country of Normandy, France. The hedgerows are thick, the lanes are narrow, and somewhere ahead, dug into a farmyard, sits a single German Panzer IV. The Sherman commander spots it first. He orders the gunner to fire. The 75mm round strikes the Panzer's frontal armor and bounces off. The Panzer IV returns fire once. The Sherman explodes. Not slowly. Not with a crack and a groan. It explodes. The ammunition cooks off in seconds. The crew of 5 has roughly 8 seconds to get out before the turret blows. 2 of them make it. The other 3 are still inside when the fire reaches the ammo rack. The next Sherman in the column pulls forward. It fires, it also bounces, it also burns. By the end of that afternoon, an American armored company has lost 11 tanks to a single dug-in Panzer IV whose crew walked away without a scratch. The men who survived started calling their own tank the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter. The Ronson Company's advertising slogan was famous across America: lights first time, every time. In the bocage of Normandy, the joke was that the Sherman did the same thing. You hit it once, it lights. The name spread through the entire armored force within weeks. The men riding inside these machines had given their own vehicle a nickname that meant rolling crematorium. Here is what makes this story different from every other tale of wartime tragedy. The engineers who built the Sherman knew. The generals who ordered it knew. The statisticians who counted the dead knew. They knew in 1942. They knew in 1943. They knew every single day of 1944 while American boys were burning alive inside a vehicle that had been specifically designed to be cheap to build, fast to produce, and easy to ship, and not ever, to fight German tanks on equal terms. They built 49,234 of them anyway. And the question that nobody in the official histories quite answers is the one that matters most. Why? To understand the answer, you need to go back to 1940, before the United States was even in the war. American military planners were watching Europe burn from a comfortable distance, and they had developed a theory. It was a clean theory, an elegant theory, a theory that would get thousands of American soldiers killed. The theory was this: tanks do not fight other tanks. That is what anti-tank guns are for. Tanks fight infantry. Tanks break through defensive lines, exploit gaps, and support the foot soldiers pushing forward. The job of the tank is not to destroy enemy armor. The job of the tank is mobility and exploitation. This was not a fringe idea. It was official United States Army doctrine, written into field manuals, taught at every armored school, and defended by the men who controlled the procurement budget. General Leslie McNair, the commander of Army Ground Forces and the single most powerful figure in shaping the American Army that would fight World War II, believed in this doctrine with something close to religious conviction. When subordinates raised concerns about what would happen when Sherman tanks met German armor, McNair had an answer ready. Tank destroyers would handle the German tanks. The Shermans would handle everything else. The tank destroyer concept was McNair's pet project. Dedicated anti-tank units would swarm the flanks of any German armored breakthrough and destroy the panzers before they could cause damage. It was elegant on a map. In France in 1944, tank destroyers could not always get to where they were needed, before the German tanks had already killed whatever was in their way. And whatever was in their way was almost always a Sherman. So the Sherman was designed inside this doctrine: reliable, mass-producible, easy to maintain, fast enough to exploit a breakthrough. Armor and firepower were secondary considerations. The original M4 used a 75-millimeter gun, weighed 30 tons, and could do 25 miles per hour on road. On paper, in 1941, this was a reasonable vehicle. The problem was that Germany did not stop building tanks in 1941. By the time American Shermans were fighting in Tunisia in early 1943, the Germans had the Panzer IV AUSF F2, with a long 75-millimeter gun that could penetrate the Sherman frontally at 1,500 meters. The Sherman could not reliably penetrate the Panzer IV at the same range. Tunisia cost the Americans 478 tanks, many of them lost to a weapon the Army's own doctrine said would be handled by tank destroyers that frequently were not there. Then came the Tiger, 88-millimeter gun, 120 millimeters of frontal armor. The Sherman's 75-millimeter round could not penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor at any combat range. The Tiger could kill a Sherman at 2,000 meters. The Sherman had to close to under 200 meters and aim for the side to have any chance at all. Getting to 200 meters from a Tiger, in a Sherman, required driving through 1,800 meters of territory covered by an 88-millimeter gun that fired every 7 seconds. The Army knew this. After Tunisia, after Sicily, after the Italian campaign, the reports came back from the front with the same message in different words. The Sherman's gun is insufficient. The Sherman's armor is insufficient. The Sherman is being penetrated by weapons the doctrine said would be handled by other means. Senior officers wrote memoranda, committees convened, and then, for reasons that require careful examination, almost nothing changed. Part of the answer is industrial. The Sherman had been designed specifically around American manufacturing capacity. The hull could be built in converted automobile plants. The engine was derived from commercial designs. By 1943, American factories were producing Shermans at a rate no other nation on Earth could match. Chrysler's Detroit Arsenal tank plant was turning out one Sherman every 30 minutes at peak production. To redesign the tank would mean stopping that production line, retooling those factories, and accepting a gap in output during the transition. McNair and his planners made a calculation. The production line was more valuable than any individual improvement to the vehicle coming off it. Part of the answer is logistics. The Sherman had been designed to fit inside the cargo holds of American Liberty ships. A heavier tank, better armored, with a gun capable of killing Tigers at combat range, would be larger and harder to ship across the Atlantic. Every ton of additional weight per tank was a ton less of ammunition, fuel, food, and spare parts arriving on the other side. Part of the answer is bureaucratic inertia of a kind that military institutions generate with extraordinary efficiency. General McNair had built his army around a doctrine. Admitting that the doctrine was wrong meant admitting that the army he had designed was wrong. It meant admitting that the men who had died in Tunisia and Sicily and Italy had died partly because of decisions made in Washington. Institutions do not make that admission easily, and McNair was not the kind of officer who made it at all. There were men inside the system who saw the problem clearly. Colonel George Hawley at the Armored Force Board had been pushing for a 90-millimeter gun in a tank since 1942. His recommendations were rejected. The 76-millimeter gun, a significant improvement, was available as early as mid-1943. Production models did not reach frontline units in meaningful numbers until after D-Day in June 1944. When the first 76-millimeter armed Shermans finally arrived in France, tankers discovered that even this improved gun could not reliably penetrate the frontal armor of a Panther tank at normal combat ranges. The Panther had 80 millimeters of sloped frontal hull armor. The 76-millimeter Sherman could penetrate it at around 100 meters if the angle was right. The Panther could kill a Sherman at 1,500 meters. For the men in the turrets, the arithmetic was merciless. American tankers in France developed tactics that amounted to an acknowledgment that their vehicle could not fight German tanks on equal terms. They learned to attack in overwhelming numbers, typically 5 Shermans against 1 Panther or Tiger, accepting that 2 or 3 of their tanks would burn in order to close the range and hit the flanks and rear where the armor was thinner. They called it the bum rush. It worked often enough to keep advancing. It cost what it cost. The 3rd Armored Division, fighting from Normandy to the end of the war, lost 648 Sherman tanks totally destroyed in combat and had another 700 knocked out and repaired. Total tank strength of the division was approximately 232 vehicles. The division cycled through its entire tank complement multiple times. The crews who joined in Normandy and survived to Germany were the exceptions. The Firefly answers one of the most uncomfortable questions this story raises. The British took a standard Sherman hull and fitted it with a 17-pounder gun, capable of penetrating a Tiger's frontal armor at over 1,000 meters. The Sherman Firefly could kill any German tank in service. The conversion was difficult, but not impossible. It was not beyond American industrial capability. It was not done. American planners concluded the production disruption was not worth the improvement. German tank crews then learned to identify Fireflies by their longer barrel and prioritize them as targets. The vehicle American engineers had declined to build was valuable enough that the enemy developed specific tactics to kill it first. The argument most often made in defense of American tank production policy is about quantity over quality. 50 Shermans could overwhelm 10 Panthers. Germany's obsession with technically superior vehicles produced tanks that were individually fearsome but chronically unreliable, manufactured in numbers that could never match American output. The Tiger I was produced in 1,347 units total. America built more Shermans in a single month. The problem with the quantity argument is that it erases the men. When an American armored company commander in Normandy called for a 5-to-1 ratio against a Panther and accepted that 3 of his 5 tanks would burn in the attack, he was not thinking about production ratios. He was thinking about specific men with names and hometowns, men whose families were back in Ohio and Georgia and California, waiting for letters that were about to stop coming. The quantity argument works perfectly at the level of army groups and production graphs. It works less well when measured in the specific arithmetic of the men inside specific vehicles on specific afternoons in specific fields outside specific French villages whose names almost nobody remembers anymore. In September 1944, with the Sherman's inadequacies fully documented, the Army was still debating whether to field the T-26 Pershing, a 46-ton tank with a 90mm gun that could genuinely fight German armor. The debate was not about whether the Pershing was better. Everyone agreed it was better. The debate was about whether the existing doctrine and production lines justified continuing to send men into battle in vehicles their commanders knew were outmatched.